Welcome, everybody. It's so nice to see everyone in person. I think we've mentioned that to each one of you personally as you came in the door, like, oh, wow, real people. It's so exciting. And it's still nice to see you guys online. So thank you for joining us, those that are online today.
And if we don't recognize you, we just put the little,
oh, I remember. That's right. That's right. We only know you from your head. Yeah. This is our first time meeting in person since 2019, which is at the Mott Center in Asilomar. And it's the first time ever we've done a hybrid. So that's like an extra layer of technical challenge, but the folks here at Moss Landing have really been helpful with that. So, you know, it is what it is now. We just get through and address the tech issues as they come up, or maybe they don't come up. So we started this symposium in 2015. It was one of the first things that I worked on at the beginning of Seattle Savvy. So Seattle Savvy was 8 years old this year, which I can't really believe. And it was in this very room, and the goal was really to bring people together to address this sort of nebulous issue of an ill-defined issue of wildlife disturbance, human wildlife disturbance. And what really provoked the start of this meeting and the Seattle Savvy program for me was a trip that I made to Monterey Bay Kayaks in Moss Landing. And I was meeting with Cass to talk with the owner, to talk with her about my ideas for Seattle Savvy and what our goals were. And I was just another person walking in her door that wanted to talk about sea otters. And so she, you know, took me with a grain of salt at that point. And as she was taking me around, I noted that there were posters all over the walls, and there were many with wildlife disturbance messaging, and they all had different recommendations, different distances, different organizations, different species, everything was, guidelines were different. And that really brought to my mind, like, one of the things that would be first on my task list was to kind of bring everyone together and try to centralize our messaging, try to get on the same page. We don't all have to have the same opinions. We don't have to have the same ideas, but, you know, get together so we all know what each other are doing and can kind of work towards a common goal. And that's really what this meeting has been about. And, you know, so our task is wildlife disturbance. It's something, obviously, none of us love seeing human disturbance to wildlife. That's why we're here today. That's why we have this conference. But there is one good thing I will say about it, because you always got to find the positive. This is one conservation issue that we can do something about. You know, it's really overwhelming: climate change, ocean acidification, pollution, plastic waste everywhere. Like, these are really hard, challenging things to even conceive of. And wildlife disturbance is something we have power to do something about. And it is challenging to change people's behavior. And we've all figured that out. And that was something that I think I had a lot of hubris about when I first started this program. Like, we're going to change everything right away, and then realized human behavior, it's not that easy. But we can empower every single human being to take conservation action in a moment by just giving wildlife space and not disturbing their behavior. And there aren't that many things that you can do in a moment's decision, that will really make a change for that, at least that sea otter or that harbor seal or that bird on that given day. And that happening over and over again, many times over, is what will really make change and create a new social norm. So that's my positive spin on the wildlife disturbance issue. I have two computers here too, so this is going to be really, which button do I push? Not that one. Oh no, Misha. Oh. No, it's there. It's here. It's not. No. She's the Mac person.
Yeah.
What did you do?
You had to click on it. So you were
Oh, got it. Okay, thank you. Like I mentioned, since 2015, I'm just going to read the goal of the symposium: to maximize our shared efforts at mitigating human-caused disturbance to coastal wildlife. In this setting, we will foster agreement on common strategies and messaging, create a forum to share ideas, celebrate innovation, and support collaboration. By sharing knowledge and pooling resources, we can make our jobs easier and our efforts more successful. And this was, I think, 2017 we decided, which was our last public event here. We had 2 more public events before COVID hit. And so now this is the first time we've been meeting together. Just to introduce our planning team: me, Cara O'Brien, so Sea Otter Savvy, California State Parks, and we've been doing this together all of those years. Heather Barrett with Sea Otter Savvy, and she's going to take all the complaints about today. Bill Stanley with Bureau of Land Management, Andy Johnson with Defenders of Wildlife, Nicole Palma. Hi, Nicole. Formerly of MPA Collaborative, and now
For about 1 more week or so, and then moving to the National Ocean Sciences Bowl program.
Cool.
Corporation for Atmospheric Research. It's a real mouthful.
Yeah, it's a long signature line on your email. Irina Irvine, National Park Service. I don't know if Irina is on virtually right now. So all these folks helped organize today. And a huge thank you for this incredible venue to Moss Landing Marine Laboratories, and a big shout out to Misha, who's back in his office right now, who is really helping us hopefully have this hybrid event move smoothly. And the tech at Moss Landing Marine Labs is really what, this is their little bird right here, and that's what makes it all come together. And then just finally, a plug for the Respect Wildlife website. It's easy, respect-wildlife.org. There's some cool information on there. This Respect Wildlife group has its origins in the first Wildlife Disturbance Symposium, where we had breakout groups. One of those breakout groups was about organizing a statewide campaign, and that was really the earliest origin days. So a breakout group that actually did something. I mean, that's definitely notable. You can find us on social media at Respect Wildlife Project, and there's some hashtags there if you feel like you want to use those.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being here today. Here, I want to close that. There we go, so I can see my screen more. So, hi, welcome. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really, really excited to talk about this project that has been ongoing for a couple years now, either in the works or actively a program. And I also want to take some time before we get started to thank the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, specifically the team here at Bolsa Chica Ecological Reserve, in addition to this wonderful group of nonprofits. That's the Amigos de Bolsa Chica Land Trust, Bolsa Chica Conservancy, and Sea and Sage Audubon, who all came together to create and support this wonderful program that is the Bolsa Chica Reserve Watch. So let's get started. This is community interactions in pursuit to reduce recreational impacts on wildlife. And I know it's kind of a mouthful, but every bit is really important. So to start, I want to introduce you all to Bolsa Chica Ecological Reserve. If you have not been here before, we are located in Huntington Beach, California, right across the PCH from Bolsa Chica State Beach, which is, I believe, is one of SoCal's busiest beaches. We are about 1,400 acres in total, and this includes both public and restricted areas. And we are home to approximately 800 wildlife species, at least 23 of which are federally and or state listed. And we are actually in the process of updating our master species list. So these numbers are maybe slightly outdated, but the point is that the Bolsa Chica has been well documented as a space for wildlife, and for lots of wildlife at that. Bolsa Chica has a really rich history, which I'm not going to get into all of it, but a couple of important bits are that it was saved from development in the 1970s. And a massive restoration project started and finally was completed in 2006, in which the full tidal basin was completed with a tidal inlet, which opened up ocean connection, which had not been there for several decades. Additionally, we get about 100,000 visitors each year, which is a lot, and it speaks highly to the public trails that we have in the public area of the reserve. But there's only about 5 miles, and I'll show you a map of the reserve next. So the public trails go from just about this is the south parking lot, all the way to the north parking lot over here, and then in this kind of loop area as well. So that is all the public, that's all that the public has to explore, and the rest of the reserve is all restricted. So, the management team here has a lot to deal with all of the restricted area, in addition to these public trails. And so what we'll be focusing on today is mainly the public area, because that's what our volunteers are able to access. So what happens is that we have reserve rules and also MPA regulations, and these rules and regulations have quite a history of being abused by visitors. So what happens is sometimes visitors either don't know that the rules exist, or they know they exist and they don't care, or they know they exist and they don't understand them. So what ended up being formed was this beautiful collaboration. CDFW, Melissa Bordy here is the reserve manager here. She brought 4 NGOs together, the 4 NGOs I mentioned earlier, 3 of which are Bolsa Chica centric, the Amigos de Bolsa Chica Land Trust, and Bolsa Chica Conservancy, in addition to Sea and Sage Audubon, which is the local Audubon chapter here in Orange County. So all of them, all the orgs, absolutely care and want to protect Bolsa Chica. And so Melissa brought everyone together, and they created this volunteer program called Reserve Watch. And the Reserve Watch launched in the end of November of last year. So we're coming up on a year. We've got about 11 and a half months in, and it's going really great so far. Throughout those 11 and a half months, we've kind of fluctuated between 25 to 35 active volunteers. And they are stationed at the reserve at one of 3 spots, which I'll show you in a minute. But their primary responsibilities are to interact with visitors and report violations to us, as well as monitor trails and wildlife. But yeah, so they're all about communicating with visitors, answering questions, explaining the rules. And the mission of this program is to better protect Bolsa Chica's wildlife and habitats by bringing the community together and really providing this education to the public on the importance of the wildlife here, and why it's important to protect their ecosystem. So the stations here are at the 2 parking lots, the south parking lot and the north parking lot, in addition to the tide gates. So we wanted to try to give the volunteers an opportunity to interact with the most visitors by having them stationed at locations where visitors are coming in or are leaving the reserve. Obviously, the 2 parking lots are self-explanatory. The tide gates location is a hot spot actually for violations, because community members and visitors will enter through this channel, the Wintersburg Channel Trail, and or the Brightwater Community Trail. So there's a lot of points of entry, and so we wanted to try to get as many of those as possible. So, like I said, we have 11 whole months of data from volunteers. They collect their data, or they collect data for us using this field sheet that is designed by us to report kind of the most common violations, as well as important wildlife observations and any other notes that the CDFW management team would need to know about or hear about. And so all in all, over 11 months, The volunteers have interacted with over 18,000 visitors, which is just an outrageous number. I'm fairly confident that by the time a year hits that we'll reach 20,000 visitors, which is about a fifth of the estimated yearly visitors. So it's really, really outstanding that, just a few dozen volunteers can reach that many people. They've also recorded and reported to us over 700 violations. So many of those are, I have pictures of some of the most common ones here, and I want to point out the three most common violations that we see. The first one is off-trail violations, visitors off-trail. We have a number of illegal trails that have been formed by visitors going off the designated trails. The second one is pet and leash violations, which primarily we see here are dogs. So dogs either in an area of the reserve where they are not permitted, or if they are on the trail where they are permitted, sometimes they are off leash, which is not allowed. Dogs always have to be on leash regardless of whether, regardless if they are in a designated trail or not. And then the third common violation we see are bikes. And bikes are a little tricky because, it's kind of hard to interface with somebody actively on a bike. You kind of have to, we don't want to have our volunteers be knocked over by bikes or anything. So a lot of those are either, people stopped with a bike in an area where they're not allowed. And so then they can communicate with them at those times, or they see passing bikes where they're not allowed. And even though they can't interface, they still get recorded. And I want to also say that a lot of these visitors and violations, many of them do comply to the rules. They will leash their dogs, or they'll go to the other trail, or they'll come back on the actual trail. Some do not, of course, and then some are all only observed. Like I said, either there's a bike that's going, in the other direction, or the visitor with the dog going the other direction. Some of them are only observed. But regardless, all violations that are seen get recorded and reported to myself and the CDFW team. So let's dive a little bit deeper into some of the violations. So here is a table of cumulative data, basically. So we're adding each month's data on the previous months before it. So I want to point out, just from the get-go, we had off-trail being in the lead of the three most common violations. And that was pretty stable for several months up until May, when dogs finally overtook the off-trail numbers. So, and then that stayed number one for a couple months, basically through the summer, right? Once the weather gets nicer, people want to come out with their dogs and go for a nice walk, which is lovely, except this is not a park. So that's what I think that's where we saw an increase in more dogs than off trail. But eventually now, where we're sitting right now, the off trail violations are still leading by a little bit in dogs. Bikes have also kind of been steadily in third place. Hasn't changed too much. And I also have fishing on here. We don't see fishing violations too often. We ask, so actually most of these numbers, I would say, are not active fishermen in places where they're not supposed to be, but actually are evidence left over from, say, overnight illegal fishing. So we ask volunteers to record anytime they see like any baits left over, any hooks or line, anything that could be, that is evidence of fishing taking place in an area that is not supposed to take place. So, and that has kind of fluctuated as well. I think it did start to pick up in, what is that, July, I suppose. But it's been fairly consistently like on the low down. I did end up doing a separate report on fishing data for CDFW and the local law enforcement in Huntington Beach, but it's something that our volunteers don't often deal directly with. So anyways, yeah, this is kind of, it's been really, really interesting to see these numbers change each month. I'm looking forward to continuing to see how they change and making other connections seasonally and et cetera. But we also want to look at overall, how has the violations to interactions ratio changed over time? And you can kind of think of this as like a relative abundance number, right? So compared to all of the interactions that our volunteers have, how often are those interactions related to a violation? So we have here a table which is directly reflected in this graph, and the column on the left and the blue bars are the monthly, so each month what was the ratio, and then the column on the right and the yellow bars are cumulative again, so overall taking into consideration all the previous months before it. So as you can see, we started at just about a 7% ratio of violations to interactions, and that steadily decreased, which was really, really fun and exciting to see, until we hit June, where it did go up a little bit. Again, we think because, you know, when it's summertime, kids are out of school, the weather's really, really nice a lot of the time, and we see more people, and therefore we did end up seeing more violations as well. But since then, we have felt pretty consistent, and since June it has also continued to go down. So right now we're sitting at under 4% violations to interactions, and starting at 7%, it's really fun and exciting to see. So overall, kind of bring it all together here. It is hard for us to make direct connections to these change in violation numbers, from the change in violation numbers to specifically wildlife behaviors and wildlife impacts, because data on wildlife behaviors is lacking, unfortunately. However, you have to remember that rules exist. The Ecological Reserve and the MPA rules exist to prevent recreational impacts on wildlife caused by visitors. So a program like Reserve Watch can be a really, really valuable tool to help keep visitors accountable for following the rules and therefore protecting wildlife. And it has proven, I think, here at Bolsa Chica to be that way exactly. I also want to reiterate that Reserve Watch is education focused. It is not an enforcement program. We're not out there citing people. Wardens and enforcement officers are so necessary to continue to uphold the rules. But a program like Reserve Watch can be really beneficial and helpful in changing behavior of visitors, really. The volunteers are presence on the reserve. They're there. A lot of them are there every week at the same time. Some of them, fill in as needed or as their availabilities are there. But regardless, I also wanted to just let you know that the community response has been overwhelmingly positive. We have had some, of course, negative interactions that we prepared and trained the volunteers for, but overwhelmingly, a lot of visitors are really excited that volunteers are there helping to protect the wetlands. So thank you so much for having me again, and my contact email, you can contact me at that email if you have additional questions or want to learn more about Reserve Watch. I know Melissa is really, really happy that the program exists here. It really helps with management. And so we encourage other management, other reserve management staff to consider a program like this if you have problems in the public areas. So thank you.